Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio. Class is in session. I want you to pull out the history books. Look back to times of great change in our country. Voting rights, civil rights, gay marriage, Vietnam. What do they all have in common? The change didn't come from Washington. It came from the bottom up, people saying enough. And to a certain extent, some could argue that that's what we began to see this week on the question of gun reform.
Yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
The passion of Beto O'Rourke against assault rifles last week brought him the title from the NRA of the AR-15 Salesman of the Month. But those gun sales will be impacted going forward with Colt's decision this week to exit the commercial rifle market, saying in a statement, "At the end of the day, we believe it is good sense to follow consumer demand." The same factored into Walmart's decision to cut back on its gun and ammo sales. They weren't directives from Washington, but businesses reacting to consumers. A July Quinnipiac poll in Ohio prior to the Dayton shooting showed people split on the question of stricter gun laws, but not on so-called 90-10 issues like increased background checks.
We must do something.
In his 17-point plan of reforms, Governor Mike DeWine said he was only proposing items he felt could pass, but even those could prove to be a difficult sell to legislators heading into an election year. Evidence as hearings got underway this week in Columbus.
I mean, to me, the issue isn't the weapon, it's the person. I don't think any of the three of us would feel any better if we took the person's guns and they walked into their spouse's bedroom and killed them with a baseball bat.
Thursday, a bipartisan group of mayors and police chiefs from around the state gathered in Columbus, urging the legislature to act and voters to prompt them to act, forcing that change from the bottom up.
We have to make it very, very clear that for every voter who votes for the NRA's agenda, there's 10 of you who vote against it.
And here's a key difference. The hearings that the legislature took part in this week involved issues that a year ago they refused to even consider. Well, this was a week also marked by the first nationwide strike against General Motors since the government bailout more than a decade ago. Back then, the UAW and GM got together to come up with a plan, compromises and the like, to keep GM afloat. A decade later, they are afloat, but the two sides, they have drifted apart. Senator Sherrod Brown has enjoyed UAW support over the years, and this week he returned the favor.
10 years ago, this country's taxpayers and workers saved GM. Public dollars involved worker givebacks on their contracts. Workers took less from the company. GM's been a success for 10 years, and now GM still doesn't want to make it up to the workers all that they gave back. So I stand with GM workers in Parma and in Defiance and in Toledo and all over.
Now, Brown there mentioning Parma, Toledo, Defiance, three Ohio cities still with a GM presence. 25 years ago, though, that list would have been a lot longer. Workers at GM's Parma Metal Center have gone from processing 500 tons of steel a day to trying to process what the impact of this strike will be on them and their families. It is for them personal. But for Ohio, the strike's impact is minimal compared to past walkouts because GM's footprint in the state is a shadow of its former self. In 1995, General Motors literally drove the state's economy. It was by far the state's #1 employer with over 63,000 workers. Since then, they've seen a nearly 73% workforce reduction in the state, with figures released in May placing them all the way down to 72nd place among Ohio employers, with 4,600 workers. That's fewer by comparison to Case Western Reserve University, which came in at number 70. Still, every job, every worker has an impact, and that's especially true in Parma, where nearly a quarter of those remaining Ohio GM workers are employed.
As you know, cities rely on income tax to be able to function and provide the services they do. So having being a top employer, not having that income tax come in, that keeps me up at night, and we're watchful on that.
Yes, the impact on those cities still home to GM is real, whether it's a short strike or long. Well, it was 1921 that General Motors moved into its new administration building in Detroit. It was at the time the largest office building in the world. 1921 was also the year that your Cleveland Indians were the reigning World Series champs. The city of Cleveland was the 5th largest in the country. And my whole reasoning for this roundabout Prohibition era throwback is to point out the fact that in 1921, the village of Cleveland Heights became the city of Cleveland Heights, and they adopted a council-manager form of government. It's what they've had ever since, but now residents will get to vote on whether to change that. Council manager is the most common form of government in communities with more than 2,500 residents, according to the International City-County Management Association. In Cleveland Heights, there are 7 council members, all elected at large for 4-year terms. Those council members, though, hire a full-time administrator to carry out their policies and run the city on a day-to-day basis. The mayor is simply one of the 7 council members who is elected council president. In this forum, supporters say the city manager is a non-political person with experience who can focus on running the city insulated from partisan politics. Opponents, though, say insulated equals unaccountable to the people, only to council. They want a so-called strong mayor form of government where a full-time elected mayor would serve in that role of chief executive. And early voting for the November election starts in under a month. With Democracy 2019, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday.